Good evening, Baruch Hashem. Yesterday we celebrated Chamisha Asar B'Av, and as the Arizal says, and I've said to you countless times, that we are now under the canopy and the umbrella of Chesed Rachamim. We ushered in the second half, like the Chassam Sofer calls the month of Av, because he said that the Aleph is Orur, cursed, the first half, but the second half is Bais Bracha, which is where we are now standing ready to be makabel all of the Shefa Rav and the Bracha of these beautiful holy days. We know that this Shabbos is not Shabbos Mevarchim, but next Shabbos is, which we will then begin ushering in Elul, and that Yaakov Avinu and Esav both saw that they were giving each of them chunks of months to have the upper hand in, as the Medrash says, and that the Arizal elaborates on. So Yaakov Avinu jumped up and he grabbed the Nisan, Iyar, and Sivan, because he knew it would be Pesach, it would be Pesach Sheni, and it would be Sivan, Matan Torah, and it couldn't be under the hashpah of Esav. So he grabbed that, but then Esav went and grabbed Tammuz, Av, and Elul. And as the Bnei Yissaschar is Myrich and quotes many, that Yaakov Avinu knew that he could not leave Elul under Esav, even though he was entitled to 3 months, because he took 3 months, but Elul, a Klal Yisrael, could not survive and be able to encompass all of the inyanim of Hachana. And we know that Hachana by Klal Yisrael and Halacha is a tremendous chelik of how a person prepares themselves for whatever the issue or the Yom Tiv or the Chag that has to be accentuated and has to be underscored and has to be celebrated and has to be participated in. So that's one of the things the Medrash says, that when Yaakov and the Sarshal Esav had their fight, that the fight encompassed this concept of Elul. That means one of the things Yaakov fought with the Sarshal Esav, which was a malach, it wasn't a real person, it was a ruchniistic fight, that he should have the power of Elul so that Yidden could come into Rosh Hashanah, Aseres Yemei Tshuva, and Yom Kippur in the proper format and fashion, and to be able to do and effectuate their tefillas, to be able to have a Shana Tova Umesuka. And we know that Yaakov Avinu succeeded in the fight in that prat, and that he got Elul, and that Esav remained just with the Tammuz and the Av. And that's how so much bad happened to us during those 6 weeks of Tammuz and Av, up until Chamisha Asar B'Av, the 2 Charbanos and the Egel and all these things that happened, that they had their the Meraglim came back after 40 days, Vayivku ha'am b'layla ahu, that night was Tisha B'Av, and Kodesh Baruch Hu said that you cried for nothing, you're going to cry for something in the future, and the Churban Batei Migdash took place on Tisha B'Av. But Elul, which of course we'll talk more about what it is and what the hours are and what everything stands for, starting next week when we usher in the Shabbos Mevarchim of Elul. Now, the pasuk begins, our Seder this week is Ekev, And Ekev means because, v'hoya, and it will be. Ekev, because tishma'un, you will listen to the Torah and to the mitzvahs, you're going to end up with all these following brachas, and the psukim go for a few psukim, baruch tiyeh mikol ho'amim, lo yevecha okar va'akara. I mean, beautiful brachas that follow. Meforshim ask, why does the word Ekev have to be employed? Which means really because. Because if you wanted to just say because, so you could have just said, V'hoya tishma'un, when you will listen, or im tishma'un, you didn't have to use Ekev, which is a very unusual word to use when you want to express because. So the Meforshim explain that Ekev also means heel. That means the heel of a person's foot is Ekev. And it says that Ekev is begematria 172. And that the Torah wanted to underscore that since in Aseres HaDibros there are 172 words. So Rashi and Shemos, the first place where the Aseres HaDibros is, says that there's 172 words and that it encompasses Kol HaTorah Kula. That means all the 613 mitzvahs. Commonly it's said, well, the 10 commandments, it's 10 ikrim that are mentioned, but it is overall encompasses and is part and parcel of all 613 mitzvahs. And that's why by Avram Avinu it says, Ekev asher shama Avram bekoli, Vayishmor mishmarti mitzvosai chukosai v'sorosoi, says the Gemara that Ekev is begematria 172, and that since Avram Avinu lived 175 years, but the first 3 years he wasn't Hikar as Baro, he was 3 years old, and then he suddenly said that there has to be a balabas to the world. It can't be that it just flew together and it just became what it is. And he kept every single mitzvah, even the D'Rabbanans, and on that pasuk, because it says Ekev, and Ekev is 172, and it's the amount of words in the Aseres HaDibros that it stands for all the mitzvahs, and that's why the Gemara says on that he even kept, because it says V'sorosoi, which is a plural, 2 Torahs, which means the Torah Shebeksav and the Torah Shebal Peh, that even Erev Tavshilin, that we know for cooking from Yom Tiv, you're not allowed to be mechen for the next day, even if the next day is Shabbos, but the Chachamim instilled and made part and parcel of the inyan of Yom Tiv and Takonis, the Erev Tavshilin, that we have to make a bracha on a challah or a piece of fish or something, an egg, that we should be able to cook Friday afternoon into Shabbos. Like this year, Rosh Hashanah is Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos is the next day, the first day of the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, not the Aseres, but it's like the first of the 7, and it's Shabbos Tshuva, that you need to have a Erev Tavshilin. Of course, we know if someone forgot to make it, that's part of the nusach. All those who make the Erev Tavshilin say that this should allow everyone of Klal Yisrael to cook, so we can rely on the nusach of what's being said, that a person may cook even if he forgot to make the Erev Tavshilin. But lechatchila, we're supposed to make the bracha al mitzvahs Eruv, and that establishes the Erev Tavshilin, and that's what the pasuk wants to tell us, that Avram Avinu even kept the Erev Tavshilin, which was 172 words of the Aseres Hadibris, and that it incorporated every mitzvah, even the Zion mitzvahs d'Rabbanan. Now, we come to and that's why it says Ekev Tishma'un specifically, and not Kisha Tishma'un or Im, because it wants to be Maram, is not just to tell you that you will have lots of bracha and you will be drenched with hashpah chutz l'derech hateva, that because you should go into the essence of each and every mitzvah. Now, because the word Ekev also means heal, we know that many people turn around and look at their life and say, what did I do this and this for? I wasted 8 years of hours of a day doing this and this, working on a project or what, which I thought was worthy of the time, but really it was not. So we sometimes mix up our priorities, the important and the unimportant. And we have to be able to take heed and stop for a moment and take stock at what are we prioritizing ourselves with. Sometimes the things that look like the main mitzvahs, the tefillin, this Shabbos, which of course are a basis of Klal Yisrael's avodas Hashem. But there are smaller mitzvahs which we would refer to them as smaller, but it could be the Roshim and Shemayim is as great as the tefillin. So one of the Meforshim says that it says V'hoya, it'll be a simcha, because we know that Vayehi is tsar and V'hoya is simcha. It'll be a simcha in Shemayim when Ekev Tishma'un, that even the things that look like you're healed, that they're not so important, and you'll put yourself into something you think is important, but when you'll realize that even what looks to the world like unimportant, that Ekev, the heel, the bottom of the body, Tishmun, but you very intensely undertake the perfection of those that many look at as unimportant, but you will meticulously observe and bring out the best in your activity with all of those seemingly little unimportant things, and you will give them priority like you give the big things that are obviously great mitzvahs. Then it will be V'hoya a simcha in Shamayim, that there will be a nachas ruach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Ekev, when you'll do those things, Tishma'un, and you will watch them and guard them and do them, then V'ahevecha uveirachacha v'hirbecha, that all of these brachas will fall into line. Now, we know that the Chidah talks about, because at the very beginning of Ekev, it really begins as part of Devarim and Vo'eschanan, the rebuke and the discussion of what they did, and he reminded them how they fell in so many areas. But then the parsha moves into the positive. And the Chidah, who lived a few hundred years ago, and he was the first one buried on Har Menuchos. He was brought from where he was buried to be buried in Eretz Yisrael on Har Menuchos. Today you can barely get a plot to have somebody buried there, There must be 20,000, 30,000 kvarim there. But he was the first to be there. So he asks that what is this Vaya'ancha and Hashem afflicted you? Vayar ivecha, and he made you hungry, and then vayachilcha es hamon, then he gave you the mon to satisfy yourselves, to eat. So the Chidah asks a question, because what does mon have to do? I mean, why would we have to say vaya'ancha, that you were afflicted, like put into a state of pain? You could have just said vayarivecha, you were hungry, vayachilcha es hamon. What's the affliction? So he quotes the Gemara that says, and he quotes the Medrash that says on this pasuk that you have to light Shabbos candles. And it's from here that we learn that a person has to be madlik candles. You have to bench licht. What does it have to do with this, with the mon, with the fact you were afflicted? So he says that the Gemara in Yuma says that if a person doesn't see his food, then he could not fully appreciate and enjoy it. And that's the reason that many blind people, unfortunately, since they can't see the food they're eating, they don't fully enjoy, and they're not satiated, and they overeat, and many of them are very overweight because of that, because they don't fully feel full and enjoy, so they keep on eating. But if a person doesn't have candles for Shabbos to bench licht, that means, and the Gemara says this, the Gemara says that you have to have oineg Shabbos, v'karasa oineg la Shabbos, and the Gemara says that you have to have light there, you have to have the candles burning. Because if a person doesn't see, no matter how delicious the food may be, but if he doesn't see the food as he's enjoying it, the level of enjoyment is much, much less. So if you want v'karas, as the Gemara says, v'karas oineg la Shabbos, it's talking about the macholim. But to get into the level of oineg, that there's true enjoyment, you have to see what you are eating. So says the Chidah, that vayancha, you were afflicted because you had the mon. But even though you could think of the brisket or the custard donut that you're eating, but you didn't see it. And if you didn't see it, then it's vaya'ancha, then you are afflicted. There's something missing in your enjoyment of the food, and it's afflicting because you're only getting partial benefit from it. And that's why on that pasuk, the Medrash says that you have to light Shabbos candles. Because without the Shabbos candles, and don't forget, we didn't have electricity 300, 400, 500 years ago. So what did a Yid do in his house for Shabbos? He benched licht. So even when it was dark Friday night, they were able to see each other and see the food and enjoy, and that was the v'karasa. And so says the Chidah, that's why the pasuk lines up in that way, and that the Medrash says such a thing about candles and light because of that requirement. Now, the pasuk says also, we learn from this Sedra, that when it says Eretz Chito Sa'ara v'Gefen v'Sa'ena v'Rimon Eretz Zeh Shemen Udvosh, that those are the Shivas Haminim, the figs and the dates and the grapes. All of that are the Shivas Haminim. We make a bari parades, but let's say if you have a pear and an apple and an orange on the table, and you have grapes there, you have to make the bari parades on the grapes or on the figs first, because in this Sedra, there's a listing of these things, and they're called the Shivas, and it gives it Chashivas and Kedima, that you have to first deal with them and make the bracha on them before anything else. But you have to make, let's say, a mezonah, because it says Eretz Chita Usaora. That we know that flour makes a cookie or makes whatever. That if you have a fig and you have a cookie that you're going to eat, you have to first eat the cookie because of the pasuk in our Sedra. Now, it then says, V'yachalta v'savata, and we know that the shefa, that means benching. And there's really only two mitzvahs aseh that we have in terms of the dibur of every day. That's a mitzvah aseh d'oraisa is benching and saying Kriya Shema. That in the morning and at night you say Shema, you have a mitzvah aseh d'oraisa like eating matzah on Pesach. Now, right after it says v'yachalta v'savata, that means if a person takes one bite out of a piece of bread and he made hamotzi on it, but it's not yet in the gedder of having a responsibility to bench the whole benching, because it was less than a kazayas. He only took one bite. He made hamotzi, he took the bite, and then he immediately stopped eating. He's in a big shaila. How big was the bite? So of course a person has to take 2 or 3 bites to make sure he's under that category of having the responsibility to bench and to be able to say full birchas hamazon and get the mitzvah aseh. But as soon as the pasuk in our Seder says v'yachalta v'savata, and you're going to eat and become satiated, full, and it says the pasuk says in Shema, we say it every day twice. Hishamru lochem pen yiftel levavachem. That watch yourselves, because you could suddenly stray away from the path of where you're supposed to be. And the Meforshim are curious, like, why does that pasuk come right after, or such positivity? Because we are frail human beings. And a lot of times success and plentiful causes us to become arrogant, to become ostentatious, to be overabundantly confident and have an ego that is almost unmatched. And from our beautiful midos and the ability to have such refinement, we can suddenly stray off the path and become very ugly human beings. So right after it talks about being satiated, and you're eating and you're enjoying and you're relaxing and and that falls under, that's the head of the category of success, of having a lot of money. Everyone says, oh, let me win the lottery. I will be feeding 1,000 families. I'll be wiping out the grocery bills for all those people who are hesitant to go back into the grocery to get a bottle of milk and to get some bread because they have a bill that's astronomical and that it's so big they're embarrassed to go in. And that somebody won the lottery and went in into a big grocery and said, let me see everyone who owes you money, and he pays off all the bill, so that the person is able to regain his dignity and his self-confidence and his pride. So everyone says that, but unfortunately there are people who have made fortunes through a lottery or through tremendous success in business, and they're not the same person anymore. They suddenly are on cloud 9, and they're God's gift to mankind. So that's why the Hishamru Lachem comes right after the words V'achalta v'savata, because those are the two diametrically opposed positions for a person to be either in North Pole or in South Pole. Now, the Chassam Sofer asks that last week you had the first paragraph in Parshas Vayeschanan, you had the first paragraph of Shema. This week you have the second paragraph. And in the first paragraph, the first thing that the Torah says, Vishinantam livanecha, you should first teach. It talks about teaching your child. You have an achrayus to teach them Torah, that they should get drenched with the concept of mitzvahs and what the Torah is all about. And then it talks about ukishartam la'os al yodecha, about tefillin. But in this week's Sedra, in the second paragraph, says the Chassam Sofer, take note, you first talk about the tefillin. Ukshartem osam la'os al yedechem, v'hayu l'totafos beineinechem, and then you say, v'limadatem osam es b'nechem, teach Torah to your child. So he asked and said, why is it turned around? That in the first paragraph, you're first talking about teaching the children Torah and mitzvahs, and then you're talking about tefillin. And in the second paragraph, you're talking about tefillin, and then you're talking about v'limadatem, about teaching Torah and mitzvahs. So he answers and says, because when a child is born, a father is dedicated to make sure that he's shaping and molding his trend of thought, his attitude towards Torah, about what life is all about, what the worthiness of time is, that you're taking time, which is life, and you're putting it into something worthwhile and noteworthy. So that's what he's busy teaching him. And then he comes bar mitzvah, and he puts on the tefillin, in actuality implementing the mitzvahs that he was taught about after he learned about them and how important they are. But when they turn bar mitzvah, a lot of times you will find that the parents' attitude, you learned this, now you're a bar mitzvah boy and you understand yourself that you have to have good friends and good influences and open up a sefer on your own, not when you have to do it, but to show that it is part of the essence of your very being and you want to learn. So at that point, after the boy turns bar mitzvah, there's sometimes a weakness in the attachment and the achrayus of the father to the son. In other words, it's different before the bar mitzvah and after the bar mitzvah. And because of that, in some cases, you will find children that are really not on the daily learning schedule of the father with the son, that many times the son is not strong enough and does not have that cementing factor and the backbone of his structured day implemented the way he did it before his bar mitzvah. So that's why, says the Chassam Sofer, in the first paragraph we talk about teaching and drenching the boy with Torah and mitzvahs. And then we talk about the tefillin. But the second paragraph, we first talk about the tefillin because we're taking off from the bar mitzvah on that v'limadatem osam es b'neichem, that you have to continue even though the child is becoming more mature and he's becoming older, but they have not established that root foundation in the cementing, firm way that he needs for the rest of his life. And that's why I told you in Chodesh year that the Arizal went out with Reb Chaim Vital, his star Talmud, in a little rowboat in Tveria on the Kinneret, and he told Reb Chaim Vital to take a drink, and that was Be'er Shel Miriam, and then he told him that your son is going to be bar mitzvah this year. And I want to tell you that you should know that the foundation of his life are the 7 years from bar mitzvah until 20. And each of those years represents 10 years of his life. And that's why the Arizal continued and told Reb Chaim Vital that when you were 15, which represented the third of the 10 blocks of years of your life. In other words, from birth until 10 is the first 10 years of your life. From birth from bar mitzvah till 14. Then 14 till 15 is from 10 to 20. And 20 to 30 is the third, from 14 to 15. So, and he said, you tell your son that be very careful with the days and the hours and everything. And this is brought down in the Likutei Torah of the Arizal, written by Reb Chaim Vital, who wrote it down, and it subsequently became years later published, that the strength of how you behave at 56 is how you were shaping and molding the years from bar mitzvah to 20. So said the Arizal. And that's why V'limadatem osam es b'neichem is written after the discussion Ukshartem osam la'osal yedechem about tefillin. Now, we know that we were talking just before about the number 172, that 172 words in the Aseres HaDibros, and that it incorporates all the mitzvahs. And we talked about Avram Avinu, that from the last 172 years of his life, minus the first 3, that he was makir and he disseminated Torah and tshuva and everything throughout the world. So we know that 100 and the Gemara says that the first 2,000 years was tohu vavohu. That was really, the Torah wasn't given, and that's when Avram Avinu, 172 years after the Churban happened, that Avram Avinu was born, and that's why they talk about the 172 years. So the Gemara says that the first 2,000 years of the world was tohu vavohu, and then Torah was the middle 2,000, and then the last 2,000 is Bias HaMashiach. And the reason that the word Ekev is employed is to be merames that Tishma'un, one of the tzaddikim said, that v'hoya, it'll be a big simcha that once you start ushering in the last 2,000 years, then the closer you get to the end of that, Tishma'un, you're going to start hearing the footsteps of Mashiach. And that's why our job in life is to bring the Gula Shlema by bringing a Nachas Ruach HaKadosh Baruch Hu with our Torah learning and with the mitzvahs we do. And that in turn brings the Shechina out of Golus, and it brings back into the world the possibility of a step sooner, and a step sooner. Now, the world, as the Gemara says, will not go beyond 6,000 years without the Geula Shlema. We are now in 5,784, which means there's 216 years to the last day of the 6,000. The last 2,000 years, only 216. We see that the world is going crazy, what's going on in the world, and that it's the Chevle Mashiach, that it must be, without any prediction. I'm not anyone to predict, but Chazal, Tzaddikim, all said that this happened because it's a major step towards Mashiach, and that happened because of Mashiach coming, and it's getting so close. So the Ekev, the end of the years, the bottom, the finishing touch of the world is Tishma'un. You will begin to hear all of those steps and all of those things which will come to bring Mashiach. Now the Gemara asks, it says, Va'ato Yisrael, by Chamishi in our Sedra, it says, Va'ato Yisrael mo Hashem Elokecha shoel me'imach. And now, Va'ata means and now, with an ayin. Va'ata, and now, Moshe Rabbeinu stopped what he was saying for all those days, and he said, okay, now Klal Yisrael, I want to ask you a question. Mo Hashem Elokecha shoel me'imach. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what does God want from you? Bottom line. And he answered the question. He said, Kiyim liyira, only to have Yira Shamayim. Because let's face it, no matter who you are, old or young, poor or rich, sick or healthy, whatever you are, it's the Yira Shamayim that molds and shapes every day of your life. That means if a person wants to do an Aveira, it's a lack of Yira Shamayim. That's the reason he could succeed. Somebody who's learning all day doing mitzvahs, he gains in his Yira Shamayim fear of heaven, and he abstains. He doesn't do the Aveira in the moment of the test. Should I? Shouldn't I? Should I eat this? Should I eat that? Should I go here? Should I go there? It's Yira Shamayim. So when the pasuk says, he only asks of you Yira Shamayim. So the Gemara on that asks, only Kiyim, only Yira Shamayim. What, you think it's so simple? It's so small. Kiyim, only. He's only asking you to have Yira Shamayim. The Gemara asks, Ota mit milsa zuta sahi? Is that really such a small thing, Yira Shamayim? So the Gemara answers and says, yeah, Gabbai Moshe, for Moshe Rabbeinu, who Hashem said it to, it is a small thing. So everyone asks, okay, for Moshe Rabbeinu, but he was talking to the whole Klal Yisrael. He wasn't just talking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Moshe, and that Moshe in turn was saying it over to them for him about himself. He was talking to the whole Klal Yisrael. So what does the Gemara say? Yeah, we say it's a little thing, Kiyim liyira, because we're talking, it was said for Moshe Rabbeinu, but it wasn't said just for Moshe Rabbeinu, and it's not just a little thing. So the Gemara answers and says, L'gabe Moshe, milsa zutrisohi, that for Moshe it was small, but they teach the Meforshim and the Tzaddikim also Gabbai Moshe, not for Moshe Rabbeinu, but Gabbai, those who stand next to the Tzaddik Hador. That means when somebody is around Tzaddikim, they're running Shabbos to a Tish, they're running to a Chamisha Asr Ba'ov Tish or Chamisha Asr Bishvat Tish. They're davening in a shul, seeing the Shechina and the Tzaddik, and following his words and his activity and his personality and his midos. So that, the Gemara says, L'gabe Moshe, for those who find themselves hanging around and being in the presence of Moshe, who is the representative of the tzaddikim of each and every generation, Vayaminu B'Hashem uva Moshe Avdo, that we have to have emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but we also have to have emunah in the tzaddikim of the door. And if someone is dovuk, attached in every which way with the tzaddikim, then they have plenty of Yiras Shamayim. That's how they get it. Kiyim liyira, if you're L'gabe Moshe, you're around Moshe Rabbeinu, and you can excel in your mitzvahs and maisim tovim by the example and just by shrugging shoulders, so to speak, being in the atmosphere, being in the Dalet Amos, watching how he davens, watching how he eats, watching how he speaks with ehrlichkeit and with truthfulness and with kedusha. Not like the Arizal says that if you hear a word of nivel peh from someone, then you should know that he is drenched with tumah. You don't have to check in or have ruach hakodesh to know what's doing inside of. Just hearing one word nivel peh, that he's in trouble. So we have to respond with a tremendous, true love of being around tzaddikim and attaching ourselves to good people who become our role models and become our backbone of life in spending our 70 or our 80 or our 90 or our 100 years in this world, to be able to excel in every which way. Now, Chazal, the Gemara asks, the pasuk says in our Sedra that Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Psol lecha, you take 2 tablets, which were gigantic sapphires. Some say it's a diamond, but many say it's sapphire. And he said, you etch into it the letters and write again the Aseres HaDibros. But as Moshe Rabbeinu was putting, as the letters were being written, Moshe Rabbeinu saw that there were splinters falling down. And the Gemara says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, because the question is, why does it say lecha? Psol means to carve out. But what's this lecha? Carve out to you. So the Gemara answers that as it was being carved out, the little chips of the sapphire were all falling down to the ground. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu told them, that's my gift to you. You take all, and the Gemara says that he took all those chips and he became fabulously wealthy because of those chips. And that was the Gemara's question, what's the lecha? And that's what it answers. That was lecha to you, the chips of the luchos shniyas. So the Meforshim say, it wasn't just to make Moshe Rabbeinu rich. He could have made him rich in a different way, 100 different ways. But he wanted him to appreciate and give over to the people the significance of simplicity. In other words, when usually something is a chip, and it falls to the ground. We just leave it there, we sweep it up, it doesn't mean much. But when we have something which is so valuable, and it's chips of sapphire, I mean, you had 10-carat sapphires on the ground, and it was given to him as a gift. So it enriched him physically, but it also enriched him spiritually, because it says that when he saw the chips, he realized that the little things that usually people would discard, they wouldn't discard this because they were sapphires, but things that are usually just an offshoot of a work of effort to produce something, a cabinet. You produce a cabinet and you're cutting the thing and you're sawing off something, and there's dust and there's pieces of what, that goes into the garbage. But the message he took to mean that as we go through life, that insignificance and simplicity is sometimes in the highest level of the room of everything we do, and it's on the dais. It's first tier, because the encasement of simplicity and humility outshines everything else and puts the finishing package of gorgeous ribbon and wrapping to the person, the human being, that it shines forth and it becomes unique and rare and remarkable in the person's daily life, exuding a radiance of dignity and worthiness. Have a Guten Shabbos and enjoy basking in the luster of the days after Chamisha Asar B'Av.